slide deck that I'm going to share with you is right here, so you can take a look at it later. But I also have some other documents in here that I'm going to draw your attention to, but I just want you to know they're all in here. So we are just really hopeful that you can focus on your notes for things that are coming up for you, but not trying to madly write down some of the things that might maybe steps or things that I'm sharing with you. But I put things in here. You also have access to my email address. It's on the bottom of that landing page. So if you want to reach out or you had a question about something, or I mean, notoriously happens, you'll try to access one of the resources I have and it says, of course, request permission, things like that. You can always reach out to me. But like Dan said, I want to share with you AI through a teacher perspective, and especially through this lens of UDL and inclusion, which I have my master's in ed tech, and I've been working with technology, gosh, forever. When I was 8, I got my first computer, my Commodore 64, that you had to connect to a TV, right? And I remember programming for hours and hours to get the computer to say, hello, what is your name? Right. So I love technology, but I want to make sure that whenever I'm working with my staff or I'm thinking about technology myself, is that the focus is always on the instruction. It's not about the new shiny tool. And unfortunately, a lot of tech is seen that way, right? If you go to some fun tech conference or something like that, the emphasis really is on uh, sometimes just this new and shiny engagement level, which, if you know UDL, that's not what engagement is, right? Or they talk about, oh my gosh, let's gamify this, and that's not engagement, right? So my hope is that even though AI has some amazing possibilities, that we always keep our focus on this idea of strong instructional practice is strong instructional practice, and that's what we need to keep our view on, right? But please interrupt me, jump in if you want to say anything. But I want to go through some of these slides with you and share some ideas with you. So the goal of just this little piece that I'm going to be talking about is exploring how we can use AI as a thought partner. And I know Dan and Kristen will share that all the time, is the idea is, and you guys have shared this as well, it's not that we're giving over the reins, right? Or we're taking our hands off the wheel. It's that for me, it's not that you're turning on cruise control, it's that you're actually hanging onto the wheel harder in a different way, right? Because we need that human interaction. We need to know how to prompt well. We need to know some really important things so that we can even have an idea of looking at the returns we get after a prompt to see if that even is a good fit for us, right? And it's all about asking AI the right question. And I know some of you, just in some of the things that you've shared, you have a lot of experience with prompting, but it's really interesting to me how the prompting, like I remember using this a few summers ago, and you had to be so careful with your prompt. It's actually gotten a bit better. And the thing that is always interesting to me is that when the vendors try to take the human out of the equation, or hey, we'll just make that easier for you, there usually is a detriment to that. So that's another piece to really be careful about. But I love analogies. They really help solidify things for me. And so I think of teachers really as general contractors, right? Have you ever had work done in your house? Right, we've had somebody come in and maybe they've remodeled a bathroom for you or something. So the teacher really gets this idea of this goal and this vision. I'm gonna have this new bathroom, right? And I have an idea in my head of what that should look like. Or of course, our vision for our lessons. And the idea is we really need teachers to become more and more comfortable with opening up their design, which we know teachers traditionally are not great at opening up, right? I know one of you shared that you're a CT, you're a consultant teacher, right? And so having teachers really be comfortable designing with you or asking questions, we've notoriously had teachers that just close their door and design on their own, right? And so really trying to lift that. And I know more and more having people trying to depersonalize what's going on in their classroom to bring in other people to help them. And so for me, it's really leaning on co-planning, which I know is a really big piece with UDL, but seeing how AI fits in that, right? Is how can they be that co-planner with you in a real purposeful way? Knowing that as you're doing that work, designing that bathroom, designing those lessons, barriers are going to come up. You're going to know about them ahead of time. You're going to find them as you tear a wall down, but knowing how we can work fluidly to use all the tools that we have to really focus on what that vision and goal is, and not, like I said before, have bring in AI to our classrooms because we know this is going to be super engaging all on its own, not really thinking about our learning goal. So I just want to caution, I always caution our teachers about that. So one thing for me with AI, and this is not just AI, this is literally any technology tool. And I know a few of you, I think everybody in here shared they have some kind of leadership role on a tech team or with digital resources. We need to really make sure no matter what that tech tool is, I don't care if it's just some real simple headset tech, right, or whatever it is, that we're really thinking about what our actual goal is and that we're focused on that real sound design practice first, right? That actually the AI has come up because we've come across a barrier, right? Not just because I want to try to plug AI into this, right? But and we know with design for our lessons, always focusing on that goal, that firm but flexible goal, right? And AI can do so much help with that. So I'll show that in a minute. And then we know that after we have articulated our goal, we know what our clear learning goal is for our students, we're starting to consider what the barriers could be, right? And it could be, gosh, I know my students well enough. I know these 5 barriers are already going to be a struggle for them. Or I've taught science and I've taught this concept so much, I know what common misconceptions are, right, for this content. So I'm keeping all those things in mind of what those potential barriers could be because we know big, huge idea with UDL and inclusion is that I'm planning so that students don't have to come across these barriers, that learners don't have to hit a barrier and then have that struggle. We're trying to design around that. And then finding these high leverage strategies. And I know in our district, we're about 3 years in with some really intentional PD around inclusion and UDL that we're trying to really hone in on what are those high leverage strategies. If our building around the 3 principles, of course, if we had our high leverage strategies around engagement, what is everyone going to do at the very least for engagement, right? And then making sure that any of our digital tools are supporting those high leverage strategies and picking those high leverage strategies for all of our principals, and then really finding modeling and support that can really help our teachers with those, right? And AI is another great support with how to actually bring those strategies to life. And then, of course, we always have just this layer of how can I make sure students have access? What are those inclusive practices, pieces that we can bring into our learning, and how can AI help us with those? So we know with these big 4 focus areas, AI can help us. But I love the idea of having these in our minds to begin with. And does that resonate with you guys? Does that make sense? That we'd focus on that instructional practice first. I mean, I know with you guys, with just hearing some of your stories, I'm preaching to the choir, right? But sometimes it is the teachers, the people we're trying to support. It's having that reminder that it's sound design first, right? We really need to have our teachers understand these pieces because if I just go into AI and ask for, hey, write a goal for this, and if I don't myself understand what a sound, firm, but flexible goal is, I can easily get trash out, right? And just use that if I don't have that training. I was at a tech conference, and I won't share who was doing the training, but they were just so excited about it, how AI was going to do all these great things for us, and it was going to help us where we weren't going to have to train teachers anymore, right? Why would we have to train teachers on goals because we can just have AI write it? Or why would we have to teach teachers how to have great lesson design if just AI can do it for them? And it just made my heart so sad, right? Because if anything, AI is really asking us to be more intentional, more careful about what we know, more critical about supporting our teachers around that sound design. So that's the piece I always really hope with technology is that we're not handing over the power because that's where I think the biggest detriment comes when we take ourselves out. And I heard you guys talking about keeping the human in the AI is the most important part. So just keeping that for ourselves and sharing that with the people we work with, I think is so important. So one thing I think is super powerful with AI because goals are so pivotal, right? And we know, according to UDL, you cannot have any learning experience without carefully articulating your goal, right? If you don't do that, then you don't even know where to start. You can't think of barriers, you can't think of activities, and that makes a lot of sense, right? So I really appreciate having AI help me after I'm kind of considering a learning goal that I want to have. How could AI help me articulate that goal even a little bit better? So really thinking about what we ask it is what we're going to get, right? So we're a Google district. I use Gemini all the time. I'm really finding that when I use different large language models, they're starting to give some of the same types of responses. So I'm not seeing any of them any stronger than Gemini themselves. And this is a great one for us. We actually purchase through Google Enterprise. So if I just go in and ask Gemini, just help me with the wording of a fifth grade lesson, right? With order of operations. Sure, it'll help me. It'll come up and spit out a simple, straightforward goal, right? Students will learn and apply rules for orders of operation. It'll help me with wording, right? And it usually has some really great wording support. It'll say things a little bit better than what I wanted to say. It might have more specific skill focused, simple, straightforward. It gives way more than it used to. Before I'd get 2 responses back, right? But now it's starting to learn that, gosh, maybe you want a skill focused, maybe you want a conceptual focus, right? But the thing we always have to remember, and it does give some great tips, but the thing we have to remember is that if I ask a better question, I'm going to get a much better response. So some of the things, and that comes with the training with UDL, right? So we know when we really dig into how to really think about goals for our students, this wording is really important. Student-friendly wording, or really considering the vocab that I'm using, thinking about pulling out that vocab, creating glossaries out of our goals, figuring out ways to clearly connect with our learners, having them come up with personal connections to our goals, and then, of course, how to break those goals down. So if I think about a prompt that really focuses on what those things are, right? So help me with that fifth grade orders of operations. But I know as a teacher that's had UDL, I need to think about student friendly language. I need to really think about vocab for pre-teaching. And I can ask it to make me a glossary at the same time. Can you also help me make connections for students in their real lives? And then what are some of those sub skills that students will need for that goal? So if you just pull in some of those pieces that you know are so important and ask that question, you get such a rich response, right? Because now I have student friendly language and I can ask it to redo it, right? I can have all the vocab and glossary pulled out that would be attached to that goal. Super powerful. We know vocab, especially for our language learners, especially for our students with different readability levels. Vocab is so important. So now I have a whole vocab and glossary attached to my goal. Connections outside the classroom, right? We know in UDL, making those connections, making those goals personal, making those goals real is so important. And then skills within the goal. This is one of those huge pieces, helping our students break things down. Here's a piece where it's going to even start to help me with some of those barriers that might come up, right? If I'm not considering the sub skills that students would even need before this goal, right? So just much more powerful response, much more design focused, right? I can always get something to help me with wording, right? I think somebody even mentioned, gosh, I had I had AI help me with a student recommendation letter. Super helpful, brilliant. Wording is great, but then getting to those deeper levels of what is the real purpose of that goal? What are things I'm going to need to know to support that goal to make it more attainable for students? Right. So that's that part that can be so powerful. Does anybody have connections with that? Have you tried using AI to help you with your goals, help teachers with those? Sometimes that can be a real stopping point for people.
Speak up because she can hear you.
Yeah.
That's mentorship. So I've worked with some of the new teachers just on writing their goals, and they kind of know what they want to say, but it's hard to put words, and so we've used AI for that.
Yeah, and the nice thing is kind of like what Tracy's showing, you put it in and is this really what you're looking for? Think again, and what if you ask it different?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's and I think that's what we want to make sure people do. They don't take it at face value, but well, how about can you also those kinds of things to get what you really want?
And a lot of my prompting will start with, can you just help me with the wording of this goal? Perfect. All right, now my next question is, what is that vocab? Oh my gosh, can you make me a glossary? Can you make me a glossary with images? All right. I have students that, and Dan was talking about this too. I have students that are mainly in a rural setting, right? Or a lot of agriculture in our area. Can you think of some natural connections or things that they would just see in their daily life that could be connected to this goal, right? So I always see AI as kind of this ongoing conversation where, oh, and then what more, right? And is there something, oh, if we really look at engagement, right? Because you can just keep adding all those questions. And one thing I have just started doing with AI that I think is really interesting, um, um, I'll ask it, is there anything more I should have asked you? Which I think is always really interesting when you ask it to just go a little bit further. And so, yeah, you've done a great job covering the key elements, but what about specificity? What about conceptual understanding? What about mathematical reasoning? So things that might not have been on my radar at all, I love to just always kind of put in there. If you know that I really have a focus for inclusion, or if you know I really have a focus for UDL, is there something I haven't asked you, right? Is there something more that I should consider? And it's amazing how it really will bring different parts, especially if you give it just a little bit of context of, gosh, and we haven't talked about engagement yet, but gosh, I really have students that don't have, that are finding trouble just getting started or things like that. Just the, what more should I have asked you is really powerful with AI prompts. And then next part that we had talked about is just this idea of barriers. And we know in UDL, one of the big pieces with inclusion and UDL is this idea of examining barriers during the design phase, right? It's not that I wait for students to encounter a struggle. I pre-build a lesson just thinking about barriers ahead of time, right? And I know you guys heard UDL and inclusion over and over. You guys know this stuff. And a lot of times know myself, gosh, I know these are barriers that are going to come up, right? I'll just pre-plan for just those. But let AI help you as well. And so the same thing, if I have a real simple um, prompt of just what are some learning barriers if I'm helping students with main idea, right? Um, Oh, and the reason I push plus is because that starts a new chat. If I don't, it's an ongoing conversation, right? And sometimes it'll pull old questions and pull them together. And I know that's something with most of our AI, right, Dan, that if we want to have a brand new conversation, there are ways to start from scratch, right? And so on this one, hey, just what are some learning barriers, right? And AI can come up with some that I definitely didn't consider, right? It'll come up with some of those just big ideas of weak vocab, lack of background, text structure, right? It'll give you some great starting points. But another piece to remember is that you know your students, right? And thinking of brainstorming barriers for those goals, having AI help you even think about ways that you could overcome those barriers, but also putting in particulars about your students. And I remember having a conversation with Dan of just, you could put in, if you have visual impairments in your room, add that. If you have students that speak a particular language, tell AI, give it the context, and it will completely change the prompt that it gives you, right? So super powerful to consider those. So if I know there are language learners, if I really want to focus on transfer for my students, because I know that's a really big idea. If I don't want it to just tell me some barriers, but actually give me some strategies to combat them, I can just craft my prompt in a way that really addresses some of those things. Because, and you heard this from Dan over and over, context really is everything, right? It just doesn't know. We have to tell it exactly what we want it to support us with. So just a little more details in the prompt, and it will go right into not just the typical barriers, but some of the things that it can do to help with that. Specifics for language learners, right? Just be really specific. If you have language learners from us with a certain cultural background, provide that as well. But knowing those UDL pieces and what you need to focus on can give you this complete difference in prompt. Tell AI that you use CAST in UDL, right? It will go and use that as a main knowledge base for itself. You can even say in your prompt, just focus on CAST and UDL. If you just focus on this knowledge base for me and then ask your question can be super pivotal. And I know Dan has shared, he's uploaded specific documents. Just use this specific document as a knowledge base for giving that information. So that can be super powerful in changing the prompt that you get. And also, I've heard it definitely helps with the hallucination part, right? If I am honing it in on the specificity of the knowledge and the information I want it to use as a base is super powerful.
Yeah, and Tracy, and this is really when we think about differentiating instruction and the idea of a lot of teachers when they hear that word, you're telling me, I don't have time, what you want me to cut, I don't have time for it. And yet when you simply put it in here, here's all the differentiate. You can sit there and say, I have students that have this, and I have other students that this, and and there it all is. I mean, it's like, so for a typical teacher to start to think about differentiation, it's overwhelming because it's how am I going to do that? And now you start to look at this and you go like, well, you don't go in bit by bit by bit. We just build our prompts. And this is kind of that understanding that what else do I put in the prompts? And this becomes my template, so to speak, for a prompt. Like every time I go in for a new unit, I've got all this stuff in there. So this is what I'm getting and I know it. And it's, as opposed to I go in again and say, do that. And I go in again. It's like what Tracy showed this whole look at here's the comprehensive prompt and here's the comprehensive information I'm going to get back from it.
And that's perfect, Dan. I love the idea of almost a template for your prompts because your goal can change and it'll change all the time what you're having students learn. But some of those pieces that you wanted to examine and look at are going to very often stay the same, right? And I love, and that's that when we first started, we started with our high school with our inclusion in UDL. And that was the first response I got is, Dabs, I don't have enough time for this. You're expecting me to make up all this stuff and come up with all these ways to support students. You're right, that can take a lot of time to build that. Oh, but guess what? AI can give us an amazing starting point. Now, it gives us way too many choices, but how perfect to come in and print this out or put it in a Google Doc and then start highlighting, oh, this is this one, this is a low energy one for me. I didn't even think about that. I can definitely, oh my gosh, slower pacing. Who can't add that into what they're doing? Right. And thinking of, oh, I already use some graphic organizers. What are some that would really be helpful? So it just gives you that starting point. You don't have to make these up on your own. It's like having that collaboration partner in your back pocket all the time. Right. And then not trying, again, like anything, not trying to do all of these, but which ones resonate for you? And a lot of times we'll have our high leverage strategies that we're trying to get teachers to use. Oh, here's that. Oh, activating prior knowledge. Perfect. That's the one I use. You could even go in and say, what are some tips on just activating prior knowledge? What could I do? It's specifically with that one. So I love that you could just keep asking that question, right? And I'll keep it in the same conversation. How could I activate prior knowledge with this goal? And just giving that as a strategy, that's great. But now it's giving you a whole list. Oh, that's right. I used to do KWL charts. I don't do those anymore, right? It's giving you access to just those lists of things that you don't have to dig all by yourself to find those. So hugely powerful. But again, remembering that the foundation is making sure your staff really understands UDL. They have those ideas of what they would even ask, right? Helping them with a template. You can make a sentence stems for them, just like we do for our students. Make sentence stems for your teachers for prompting. Be so powerful, right? And then this next one, helping with strategies. Again, we could just say, what are some instructional strategies that would help with biology goals? And like I said, if we ask surface questions, we're going to get surface responses back, right? We'll get some, oh yeah, hands-on, that's really great, or go on a few field trips. But it's having our teachers really understand some of those pieces that are really powerful, thinking about strategies that are UDL based, remembering that a lot of those UDL pieces around offering options or scaffolds for students are hugely powerful. And so when we ask high leverage strategies, we actually bring up CAST research, right? I'm also really focusing on scaffolds and choices for students. When I go in and ask just a little bit differently, the richness of what I get back is hugely different. Oh, CAST is telling us about these things. Here are some visual representations for biology, charts and concept maps, right? I just get things back that are just so much richer. Engagement, the why for learning. So that's the piece we really want to make sure our staff understands is those big nuggets of design that are so crucial and asking those right questions. I'm gonna, one of the things from my folder that I think is super powerful is having people really understand their learning goals. And I don't know if you've worked with your teachers on this. I know someone was talking about the goals, but this actually is kind of a step-by-step of really having people consider clarifying their learning goal, right? Asking AI to help you with that. And then step two, do they know if their goal is a content or a process goal? And this is so important because it helps you pick the next step in your design, right? Process goals are really students that are learning a particular skill or ability. And if I have a process goal, it's really going to ask me to work on scaffolds and choices. How are students going to get to that process? Asking AI to help me with different scaffolding choices, right? And these are all just right from AI. So I want to write a persuasive essay. What are some scaffolds that could help me, right? Or if it's a content goal, the focus is then on choices of ways students can actually demonstrate their learning. So here's just a process goal of identifying the main parts of a plant. And so AI can help you with all of those choices of demonstrating understanding. So and again, that was just in that research or in that folder for you. But having teachers really have a chance to think about um, what do they really know about design? What do they really know about UDL? And having AI help them with those pieces. What are some great scaffolds? What are some choices for demonstrating understanding? What are some ways to engage students, right? Or I'm trying this engagement strategy, it's not working well. What are some tips or things that I could do, right? And these other ones we're going to go through. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dan. But hopefully that really resonates with you that the idea is it really is about putting instruction first. It really is about not falling for the new and shiny. There's a ton of AI tools out there right now, and there's a ton of like current tools where they're trying to build in that AI element, right? But don't fall for the new and shiny. Keep instruction first. Be critical, right? And just keep learning, trying those things out with your students, with your staff, with knowing that your main goal is really about UDL and inclusion for your students.